welcome to this episode of What's Happening Waupaca. I am Joni. We are talking with three gentlemen from the city of Waupaca today. We have Justin Behrens, who is the Director of Public Works. Welcome to the show, Justin, again.
Yeah.
We've had you on before. We have Aaron Jensen, who is the new city administrator, and we haven't had you on since you became the city administrator, so congratulations on the position.
Thank you, appreciate it.
You bet. And we have Andrew Dane, who is the economic development specialist with the city of Waupaca.
Yeah.
So today we are going to be talking about some things that are happening with zoning code rewrite in Waupaca, the comp plan, and then with an update on the Main Street project. So let's start with our first segment, talking about the zoning code rewrite. And I'm going to turn this over to Aaron. Explain this to me, because I don't have any idea what this actually is.
Yeah, that's fine. You're not alone, I don't think.
Well, and that's going to be a lot of people are going to say, yeah, I know what's going on as far as they're rewriting it, but I don't understand what impact that's going to have on me.
Sure. So I'll start back in the summer of this past year, 2019, and maybe even the spring. It was before I got here. The city went through a zoning code audit. It basically went through everything, had suggestions for how to possibly make changes, streamline processes moving forward. That led to where we're at now, which is kind of the beginning to the middle of the zoning code update. Going back further than that, the zoning code was put in place in 35, 45 years ago, and over the course of time has had a number of updates in this section or that section, but the structure of it is 40 plus years old, approximately. So what we're looking to do in this zoning code update is really to provide the tools and a structure to which the city and staff can work with residents, work with businesses, and work towards solutions that are more focused in today's age with whatever it may be, residential spaces, business spaces, than maybe working with a set of tools that's 40 years old. So there are a number of things that go into zoning, a number of things that it touches on, and we're just looking for an updated set of tools, to put it in a really simplistic term.
So what kind of effect is this going to have on the residents of Waupaca? I mean, are you changing some of the zoning codes?
Yeah, good question. So to be very simple, if someone wants to come in, let's say they want to put a fence up in their yard, it might change the way that process looks to get a fence permit. There might have been requirements in the past that maybe no longer are required, or there might be a separate application that maybe we didn't have in place before. That type of work. If you want to put up an accessory structure or a detached garage or something like that, those are examples that a resident would, zoning code impacts the processes in which a resident would work through in those types of scenarios.
Is everyone who has already gotten a permit going to be grandfathered in, or are they going to have to go back and start the whole process all over again?
Yeah, no, definitely not. So if something changes and we decide that one structure is more beneficial or advantageous for the future than what our structure has been, there will be no required changes from everyone who has done projects in that old structure. So,
because that would be one of their questions. Do you think, Justin, that it affects the public works aspect of the city at all?
It does. The zoning, I guess, you have the different types of zoning. So you have residential, commercial, industrial, in generic terms, and where those are identified in the city affect how, I guess, transportation is set up. So whether it's the roads, sidewalks, bicycle accommodations, and how we do that and where we do that kind of affects basically where the major residential areas, where the schools, where the major businesses, and where we'd see more traffic. So as these tweaks kind of come, It may kind of alter how we, I guess, adjust our maintenance programs and things in the future to allow transportation with and throughout the city.
So gentlemen, what do you think would be the single biggest thing that people can relate to right now from a business standpoint on the zoning code that we talk about a bunch that we're going to address?
Well, oftentimes, I mean, the two big topics that come up oftentimes is signage and parking. So those are two topics that might also get addressed as part of this update. Maybe it's worth mentioning, we're still kind of in the early phases of working with the consultant to update the zoning code. So March 9th, I believe, at 6 p.m.
March 16th.
Oh,
It was March Monday.
edit that out.
Got
March 16th.
March 16th at 6 p.m. at the Danes Home. We're going to we're going to invite the community to come in, and it's going to be a deep dive into zoning. I'm guessing, we have an email list of people that came to our first comp plan meeting, which we'll get into later. I don't want to confuse anybody. But we are communicating with that group, letting them know that, hey, if you're interested in the zoning piece, make sure to come. A lot of times the people that are interested in the zoning piece are people that know, maybe they have a business and they know they have future expansion needs, and they have a specific interest in a certain spot of town, or so on and so forth. We expect to see those types of people. We expect to see people that are interested in the Fulton Street corridor, what's happening with Kmart closing, with Shopko closing, big box retail, the state that's in right now, not just in Waupaca, but statewide, nationally. What are the structures we can put in place zoning-wise to allow certain types of uses that may stretch beyond big box retail in those areas? And those are just conversations we're having right now. We're not even sure where that will go, and it'll be driven by public input, to be perfectly honest. But those are some things that maybe the listener can hear and relate to and say, oh yeah, okay, I want to have a say in that. So anyone who is interested in that type of thing, we invite to come out on March 16th at 6 p.m.
A week off. You were
Right.
only a week
I
off.
know.
I'm usually more than a week off, so
Okay.
you got,
I don't feel so bad.
no, you don't need to feel bad. So it really is, the zoning meeting really is about the business people you were talking about and what you're going to do with some of those corridors like Fulton Street, which right now has a lot of big closed stores with Kmart and Shopko and
Yeah, well, two recent ones that are pretty noticeable, and I think a lot of people are concerned about that, and they feel like maybe they can't go get shoes down the road like they used to, or whatever it might be. So yeah, those are it's a conversation we'll be having as a part of that March 16th meeting.
But residents are also invited to that. I could see me, if I were a resident of the city of Waupaca and I wanted to put up a fence, let's say to keep my dogs in the yard, that this would concern me if I knew about it, because I wouldn't know what you were going to do, if anything, with the zoning regarding my residence.
So yeah, so when we're talking, when we're talking about that type of thing, like fence permitting or permitting for accessory structures or whatever it might be, we're talking blanket across the board. So how do we want this process to look for any resident moving forward going through this process? We're not talking about specific parcels of land or specific, at least in that case, or specific areas who have fences or anything like that. Hey, what do we want moving forward? Is it realistic to think that homeowners are going to want fences? Is it realistic to think that they might want them in this manner, and as long as it's not impeding neighboring properties, as long as it's not impeding sight lines and streets or safety issues? Those are the types of things we'll talk through, and those are the types of things that will help us come to a final process or decision on how we move forward with an application.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, just to kind of summarize this, the zoning code rewrites, which really are going to affect the entire city, are more about just tweaking the processes of permitting or what you need to do as far as residences are concerned. But when it comes to commercial, you're going to be talking about, what can we use the commercial land for moving forward? And those could be some more major rewrites to the zoning code than anything else. Did I get that?
Yeah, so I think our zoning code is the framework for which guides processes and guides use of land and
Right.
guides that type of stuff. So I think the framework will help guide those processes and the large and the small. I think that's a great segue though, because I know we're going to be talking about comp planning and land use to that comp plan process, which is moving concurrently with our zoning code update. They're kind of happening in parallel lines, and Andrew is actually leading that. And I think that might be a good segue for you to talk about comp planning.
We actually are going to take a quick break first, but I like that because you talk about segues. That was really good, Aaron. We are going to take a little break right now. My name is Joni. You're watching What's Happening Waupaca. We'll be right back.
What is the 2020 census? Every 10 years, the census records everyone living in this country. It's written in the Constitution and comes in a questionnaire that counts everyone who lives at your address on April 1st. The data can be used to inform funding for services like fire stations, schools, clinics, and representation that affect your community. Shape your future. Start here. Visit 2020census.gov.
Welcome back to this episode of What's Happening Waupaca. I am Joni. Today our guests on the show are Aaron Jensen, who is the Waupaca City Administrator. We have Andrew Dane, who's the Economic Development Specialist. And we have Justin Behrens, the Director of Public Works. We are talking today about some topics that are happening with the city of Waupaca. We were talking about the zoning code rewrite, and I think it's worth mentioning again that you are having a meeting at the Danes House on March 16th at 6 p.m. that everybody is invited to if you have any questions or want more information. But you were talking about, and you brought this up and brought it in very well, going into what is happening congruently with the zoning code rewrite, and that is the comp plan. Mm-hmm. So Andrew, tell us what that is.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for the city to be working on the comp plan and the zoning code at the same time. The comprehensive plan is I like to think of it as kind of an umbrella document. So it's a document that's kind of an official policy document of the city that looks out 10, 20 years into the future. And it touches on topics like transportation, housing, land use, economic development. And essentially it's a long-range plan or a vision for the city. And it helps kind of wrap your arms around all the different operations that are going on in the city. But kind of at the core of it, it's sort of how do all these pieces fit together in terms of land use. And part of that comp plan is actually developing a future land use map or a preferred land use map that shows what are the land uses we want in the future. That land use map then in turn is operationalized or brought to life through the zoning code. The zoning code is actually sort of the regulatory tool, one of the tools that you use to implement the vision or the future land use map in the comprehensive plan. So I like to think that, the comprehensive plan is kind of, 50,000 feet up in the sky here. The zoning code is kind of down here, street level. It's one of the things that it's a tool, just like TIF or just like street design, streets, other projects that you're doing in the community. The zoning code is essentially what helps you implement that vision that you come up with in the comp plan.
Okay. I mean, I think I understand. I think I understand it, and I understand what the comprehensive plan is versus the zoning code. I'm sitting here saying, so what Waupaca is taking a look at, and especially from an economic development standpoint, you're saying what Waupaca is taking a look at as part of the comp plan is where do we want the city to be in 10 years or 20 years? Yeah,
I mean, essentially, it's sort of like where are we now? So kind of look at existing conditions. We'll look at some trend data. We'll look at, what are the trends in housing? What are the trends in economic development? What are the trends in transportation. So you take that trend information, and then you also, we're doing public outreach and community surveys and interviews with business leaders, and we kind of, through those conversations, identify what are some key issues or key concerns in the community, and then we look at sort of that trend data, and out of those two things, we get kind of a lay of the land, sort of where are we at right now, what are the priorities that people are concerned about, and then from there, we try to establish some goals and some strategies and some actions that will help us sort of, move forward on these different topic areas.
I think it would be an easy way to think of it as kind of a planning tool. Not only is it what we want to happen, it's also kind of what we think is going to happen based on the data that we have. So we may want a certain thing to happen, but if the data is suggesting otherwise, well, this document is going to show and provide us that information that says, well, we may want X, but probably what's going to happen is more like Y. Then we can use that for our benefit to be fiscally responsible, help develop the city, and all the things that Andrew touched on.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point Justin made, and I think that it's important also to note that what we want to happen is driven by a public input process that is really what our community wants to happen. And that was actually a meeting that has already happened, and that was a month ago,
January 6th.
January.
Danes Hall. We did a visioning workshop, and I think about 40 people attend that. And then after that, we did a survey. We had about 400 people chime in on the survey. Mm-hmm. And then Aaron and I have also been facilitating some smaller focus groups with some business leaders, community leaders, trying to gauge the pulse on what are some topics of concern, and even getting ideas on kind of strategies. I mean, one of the big topics that's been brought up is economic development and just the importance of talent attraction, just trying to get people to move to Waupaca or stay in Waupaca, because a lot of the bigger employers they're looking for people, they're looking for that workforce. So how do we, how does the city look at quality of life? How does it look at parks and trails? What can be done to make a city a more attractive place to attract and retain workers, which in turn is going to take care of the businesses?
And a lot of that is based on what is happening not only in Waupaca as far as past or trend, but what is happening in other communities around the state and around the country, correct?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, we've been talking a lot about, economic development, the Fulton Street corridor already here, so just to kind of continue on that theme, we know, for example, that there's been some challenges with, big box retail. It's not just in Waupaca, it's across the whole country, right? With the increase in online sales and a lot of other factors, there's been a decrease in kind of, we've seen it in a lot of smaller communities and a lot of bigger communities where a lot of larger stores have gone out of business or closed their stores. So, looking at some of those trends, how does Waupaca position itself in the future? What does, if we look at land use or zoning, what are some other, tools that we can use to try to attract the attention of some retailers? Or another strategy is, can we look at areas like Fulton Street or Churchill Corridor or downtown, and can we incentivize some additional housing in those areas? Can we bring more people to live by our existing businesses? Because businesses need customers in order to thrive. So how do we get more people to move into the downtown? How do we get perhaps more people to move into some of these areas and support the businesses that are here?
What do you find the city of Waupaca residents to be saying? Do they want Waupaca to grow a lot, or do they want it to stay the way it has always been?
I love that question.
That's a great question, really, because so I think that as Andrew mentioned, we got 400 survey responses back, and a common theme was we need to attract people to our area, and we need to attract specifically younger families. We know our demographics are aging, and not only here, but tons of rural counties, communities all over the state and all over the country. And he already touched on the workforce problem. We just don't have enough people to work. And we talk about our large employers, but also our small businesses and our police department, our departments. The amount of applications we get today compared to what we got 10 years ago is vastly different. And I think everyone can see that. So to answer your question, we have seen a want for increasing population, and that helps us in a lot of ways. It helps our schools, it helps our tax base, it helps what we can provide as services, it helps our businesses. Now, I will also say if all of a sudden our community went from 6,000 to 10,000 in 3 years, we'd probably have people screaming the other way, right? So I think a sustainable growth is probably what people would like to see the most. It's not likely that our town goes from 6,000 to 10,000 in 3 years.
That would be a surprise.
Right. But if we can, right now, I mean, the trend suggests that we're really going to flatline. All communities are going to flatline in our scenario, and if we can just have an impact on that to see some slow and steady growth over the next 10, 20 years, that's what we're shooting for.
And talking about some development, some community development, not only with public works, but with economic development, talking about the tax base, that's always a great way for people to say, yes, I would like to see more people here, having more tax base, having more of the things they need and want from, and public works is a huge part of that as far as water and sewer and, sidewalks and getting things fixed and in good condition. But there is also a segment of Waupaca that wants to keep it small town. And I keep coming back to the discussion, which I think has been happening for many years, of Walmart moving to town. What does that do to our small businesses? And this is part of economic development, right? If we get a big box store like Walmart to come into Waupaca, if we decide to attract that kind of retailer, what does that do to the small businesses that are on Main Street, and what then do we do to either counter the effect of that or to help the two types of businesses live, both be equally productive?
Sure. So I think we were just talking about this morning. I think that, and we think that sentiment has changed over the last decade a little bit. So, 10, 15 years ago, I think that, it was split pretty 50-50 on, do we want a Walmart or a Target or a big box store to come in because we think it'll hurt downtown. I have heard from those same Main Street business owners, they have actually come up to me and said, hey, I was actually one of those people that said that 10 to 15 years ago. And I think now that it might be a good idea to have a Walmart or something coming to town, especially considering we just lost our retail, so it's a little different. So I think sentiment has changed. Not that that doesn't exist, not that there are people that think the other way and would be opposed to that. We have seen a shift just through our conversations and feedback we receive in the amount of people that would support something like that.
Okay, well, that sounds good. And I like the conversation because I'm sitting here from my point of view and my perspective, actually going both ways. There's part of me that says, yeah, no, I don't want that kind of change. And then there's part of me that says, this is a good thing. So I think it's great that you're reaching out to the community, getting surveys back, having meetings, making sure that you understand what the residents of Waupaca want. So they're feeling like they have a voice in the decision. So I think that's great. We're going to go from the zoning code and the comp plan, and we're going to go right into Main Street. And we've talked about Main Street on this show before, but we're just going to get an update on it in our next segment. You are watching What's Happening Waupaca, and I am Joni. We'll be right back.
The Waupaca Recreation Center, featuring programming for all ages. Home of the Waupaca Senior Center and youth programming Friday and Saturday nights, featuring 2 full gyms and space for various sports and activities. Visit the dance exercise studio for a variety of classes. The rec center is a safe place to hang out. Also featuring a computer lab and classes, and a meeting room and other facilities available for rent. The rec center features different programming and meetings, and is the home of the Parks and Recreation Office. The Waupaca Recreation Center, a great place for all ages and activities. 407 School Street, downtown Waupaca.
Welcome back to this episode of What's Happening in Waupaca. I am Joni. We are talking with Justin Behrens, who's the Director of Public Works, and we're talking with Andrew Dane, who is the Economic Development Specialist, both for the city of Waupaca. Aaron Jensen had to leave, but we're going to be talking about, in this segment, the downtown corridor or Main Street project, which I know has been a huge discussion for a long time. And I'm glad that the two of you were able to stay, because I think both from an economic development standpoint and from Public Works, this is a huge project that I could foresee having short-term a lot of effect, especially on tourism downtown and on the businesses downtown. So with that kind of start, I'm going to turn it over to you, Justin, and let you try to explain where we're at with this.
You mean just the project or the impact to the downtown?
Let's talk about the project first, because every time I talk with someone, they give me some years. I think we started with 2019, 2020, and it continues to get backed up because this is obviously a very complex issue.
Yeah, so right now we're within the design portion of the roadway, the project, the roadway and the utilities. We're at a 60% milestone, which we're about 2/3 of the way through of a design plan. By the end of the year, it'll be completely done and it'll be out to bid for contractors to bid on. So that's where we're at in a little nutshell there. Do you want me to keep going on that?
Yes, I do. What is Main Street? For me, a resident of the city of Waupaca, what is Main Street going to look like? What is going to happen? How long is it going to take? When are you planning for these things to start?
So I guess the limits of the Main Street, I should have mentioned that right away, it's from Badger Street, near the post office there, all the way up to Granite Street / Water Street, which is where the Danes' home is. So that is the project limits, those 4 blocks. Going down the side roads, so you have Union Street, Fulton Street, Session. We're not extending down those side roads very far at all. As far as what the road is going to look like, it's still going to be a 2-lane road. We're still going to have angled parking on both sides for most of the project. Like right now, we don't have angled parking throughout the entire downtown, but it's here and there. The sidewalks are still going to stay pretty much the same. About 10 foot wide is what we have downtown now. That's going to stay about the same. The signals are going to be removed and replaced with a 4-way stop at Fulton Street and at Badger Street. And
I'm going to interrupt you and ask why.
Because while we've been designing this, we had to do a traffic study. That was, I should back up a little further. So with the project, we've been funded by the DOT. So we've received some funding. If we're going to accept their funds, then we have to follow their rules. And so we're following that process. We had to do a traffic study on the downtown corridor here. What came from the results of that is the engineers found out and they said, hey, these intersections will perform the same or better if you put stop signs there versus signals. And the first time we heard that, at least me, the first time I heard it, I was like, whoa, wait a minute, are you guys crazy? Are you sure about this? Those signals have been there for like 30 years. And they're like, no, the data suggests this. So that's when we decided to do that pilot study, which I'm sure a number of people remember. We put in the red flash, we put a survey out there, we just basically observed how it functioned. We took the results of the survey, the opinions of the downtown businesses, plus the data from the traffic study, and it basically said, yeah, you're going to be better off with 4-way stop signs downtown here. you know, which is, it's a change. You know, it's going to be a little bit of a shocker, but the one thing to think about is Main Street, this from Fulton down to Badger, used to be old Highway 10. Well, Highway 10's been rerouted. So now the number of traffic, the number of trucks that come through has changed quite a bit since, well, when they rerouted 10 umpteen years ago, so.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I do remember the flashing, the stop signs, and wondered, because evidently I was out of the loop, wondered what happened to the stoplights.
Well, we advertised, so we thought we did a good job, but maybe we need to do better next time.
Gotta get on what's happening in Waupaca more.
That's
There you
right.
go. You need to come on the show. Evidently, I missed something important. So the look of the street is going to stay relatively the same as it is now. You're just going to be, are you going to be updating the water and the sewer and make sure that the sidewalks are all level? I mean,
Yep, yeah.
because that was one of the things that I heard from someone was I keep tripping because the sidewalks
Yeah.
need to be repaired, and then I tripped, and I went, yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
I think you know, I know, Justin, one of the things they've been looking at quite a bit is just improving the walkability down there. So, you know, in some cases, I think the walkability improves a little bit with the four-way stops. You know, pedestrians have an opportunity to get across the street a little bit quicker, a little more easier, and which actually from an economic development standpoint is a positive because it allows shoppers to kind of bounce back and forth across the street, perhaps a little bit more. And then in addition to that, I know one of the other kind of walkability improvements is to do, I believe, Justin, you're still planning to do some bump outs at some of the different intersections that'll decrease that crossing distance for pedestrians, make it feel a little safer, create a little bit different environment, pedestrian environment down there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the bump outs have been a hot topic in the past. I don't know if you know what a bump out is?
I do know what a bump out is.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, the sidewalk or the curb will just go further out into the intersection so that as a pedestrian, you can get further out, have a better view before you cross, and it makes a safer condition. Now, the reason we're doing it is not because, you know, we like the way it looks. I mean, that's going to be part of it. When we first started designing this, the DOT said they wanted parallel parking because that's part of their standards. So, and we said, no, we want angled because if we go to parallel, we're going to lose 50% of our stalls.
Yes.
So we worked with the DOT and, you know, it's just said we have to maintain this angled parking. We can't lose that many stalls. And we came up with this exception of standards, they said, or it's part of their process where they would allow the angled parking if we provided the bump outs because the angled parking is a lower of a safety. How would you explain that?
It's less safe.
Less safe.
According to DOT.
Yeah. According to DOT, so the parallel parking is a safer way to park and safer for pedestrians versus the angled. So they just said that's the trade-off. You can keep angled, you got to keep the bump outs to promote that safety with the vehicle movements and the pedestrians.
So that's going to be on the corner of Main and Badger as well as Main and Fulton?
Every intersection will have bump outs added.
Okay. When does this project, when are you planning, or when is the city now planning on starting this project? If you're going to be getting bids next year?
We're planning on breaking ground spring of '21.
Okay.
So
It's coming up pretty
yeah,
soon.
depending on the weather. I mean, it could be as soon as like March, but most likely probably April of 2021.
Are you going to tear up the entire 4 blocks at once and try to get it done, or are you going to do it 1 block at a time?
We just had a public information meeting about a month ago, and that was one of the items we asked from the public. It was like, hey, we have a couple different ways we could do this. What's your input? We gave them a couple options, you know, based on, you know, constructability and cost, what we thought would be a benefit to the city. And so the options were, yeah, shut down the whole thing, rip it up, get it over with, which would reduce the schedule by about a month and maybe save about 10% in cost. And the other option was, let's split it in half. Let's do North Main, north of Fulton, one time, and then the second stage would be south of Fulton, which the schedule now is about a month longer, but only 2 blocks of Main Street are affected at a time, and that's, so the input we got back was go with the 2-stage approach, because if you're going to have a business that's affected, well, now it's only affected for about half the year, not nearly the full year.
So when do you think that, in an ideal scenario, when you break ground in spring, March, when would you finish? That same fall?
Yes.
Is that the goal?
Yeah, so 100% complete should be done October, November. And, you know, when I say 100% complete, that means we have all the stripes are on the ground. You know, you can drive anywhere, park anywhere. You're not going to see a cone left. We're probably going to get to a point, you know, in the late summer, early fall, where you're gonna see a road. You'll be safe walking on it. It may not be 100% because we don't have the signs up, we don't have the lines painted, you know, that sort of thing. But yeah, by fall, it's going to be done.
So so it truly isn't going to look a whole lot different than it does now.
Well, what's out there now is an asphalt road. We're planning a concrete road. So that's going to look majorly different. You know, it's going to go from a dark gray, black to a stark white.
I know when I looked at the initial plans, I mean, they were talking about dressing up the sidewalks and, you know, planting some trees possibly and doing those kinds of things.
Yep.
Is that still part of the
It is.
part of the plan?
Yep, it is. You know, we've had to make some changes, some revisions as we've been along here to make sure it fits within our budget. So at the very, very beginning, you know, go back several years when this whole process started, you know, there was community meetings, and it was like, okay, what do you want it to look like? We developed some concepts. We came up with some big plans, some big ideas, you know, and we're trying to hit those. But I mean, the reality sets in is we have a set amount we need to stay within. But you know, we're still committed to making downtown look great. I mean, we're going to have a nice road. We're going to have some nice sidewalks. We're going to have trees. We want it to look like a great place. So.
Great. What, Andrew, does this project and being torn up for 6 or 8 months, 6 months is kind of what you're thinking.
Yeah.
How does this affect the downtown business owners and tourism for that entire summer?
Yeah, I think it's always a challenge, right? When you see this, you know, process, there's no easy way around it. You know, you can do marketing campaigns. You talked about doing things like getting a trolley in here. You put together some brochures. You explain to people how they can access the businesses on foot. You know, you direct people towards where they can park. But it still invariably, you know, is challenging time for retailers and businesses while their front lawn essentially is torn up. So, you know, I think that's the struggle in the short term. And just getting creative and just trying to, you know, I think there's some pretty dynamic retailers downtown and pretty clever folks, and so working with the city, being proactive and helping guide people to those parking locations and maybe doing some of those other things I mentioned. Nonetheless, that'll be challenging in the short term, but, you know, I think in the long term, you know, a lot of those businesses and certainly these buildings have been here for, you know, well over 100 years. You know, you get into the fall now, and, you know, you see the opportunity to maybe, you know, you see the back end of this thing where you've got this, you know, really nice amenities in place, and the place is looking really good. And so we would like to think that you know, is going to be a net positive, you know, overall, and hopefully encourage, you know, some additional. Typically with these projects, you know, you'll see businesses coming forward and doing, you know, some facade improvements, or, you know, investing some of their own money into doing some of these enhancements as they see some of the public improvements, and it kind of snowballs or feeds off of itself. So I anticipate, you know, if a rough patch while we go through that construction period, but I'm guessing probably the next spring, the next summer, by 2022, things will be looking really sharp down there.
So let's talk about this in terms of the comp plan, because, and it could be that, I mean, obviously I'm not economic development director, and I'm not public works person. I know what it is, you know. When you talk about envisioning where the city is going to be in 10 or 20 years, how do you see the new Main Street corridor affecting economic development in a positive way in the coming years? Do you think it's going to drive more people downtown? Do you think it's going to help bring more residents here to live? I mean, what is the whole dream of this other than updating? Because if the downtown corridor is anything like the library redoing the parking lot, it really needs to be updated as far as the public works, right?
Yeah, well, certainly the goal is to keep downtown vibrant. I mean, like it's the heart of the city, so let's keep business strong down here. There's a lot of amenities for the residents downtown as well. So if we keep the businesses, the commercial district strong in the downtown area, you're going to have a lot of residents that are going to want to stay down here. It's going to draw the tourism in, which is going to bring more economic money into the area. So I mean, that's the goal is, and the focus in the next couple of years is downtown. You know, and then the comp plan is, like Andrew said in the last episode, is the 10, 20-year look ahead. So the other projects start kind of falling in line, and so we switch focus from downtown to another area, and we're hoping that this place is strong.
And I guess it's interesting to go back and, you look at some of these. It's easy to sort of take inventory of what we don't have right now, and people sometimes, say, look, we don't have the Kmart, we don't have the Shopko, and those are issues and frustrations that people have. But and just looking back at some of the plans that have been done over the last few years, and you look at some of the improvements, and you just take stock of some of the improvements, whether it's to the park system, whether it's the Danes Hall. You've got a couple breweries in town. You're seeing some investments and some new businesses in the downtown sector, some people purchasing some buildings down here. There's really been some pretty significant improvements and amenities, new coffee shops added. So I like to think with this, in some ways, with this improvement is going to sort of help continue that momentum. And I think kind of the vision for the downtown is that you start to attract some more residents down here, and it starts to feel like more of a vibrant kind of neighborhood. And I think that's going to help address some of the other concerns we heard through the survey, is that, some people saying, we're concerned about drugs use, we're concerned about people loitering, or we're concerned about the look and of the environment down here. If we can get people of different incomes and we can get more investment downtown and more people living downtown and keeping an eye on it like it's their own backyard, like it's their own neighborhood, that really starts to address some of those other concerns people have. And then I think, like Justin said, looking out in the future, this public improvement of Main Street, how long should that street be good for? 50, 75 years?
That's the plan. That's the goal. Yep.
It's a long-term investment, and so the city can then pivot and say, what about that Fulton Street corridor? Or are there some things, we've talked about, people said, look, let's clean it up a little bit, or can we make this more of a gateway? Can we really embrace the new branding and wayfinding strategy, which is all about chain to main? And can Fulton Street corridor be revitalized or repositioned a little bit to encourage more additional investment out there? So I think this provides an opportunity to kind of move on to maybe spending some more focused attention on areas like Fulton Street or Churchill Street.
So really, to put it into its most simplistic form, investing in yourself will bring investments from others.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think that's, and also just very simplistically, you build off of your strengths, you leverage your strengths. You got to work from what you have, and the city of Waupaca has, you do have a great downtown, you got some great historic buildings, you've got the chain, you've got some great employers. So there's a lot of, I always like to say, people, I actually live in Appleton, and it's surprising how many people will come to Waupaca, to go, groups of women come here and they get their hair cut. Waupaca's on the map as a kind of a destination for people that are doing day trips, and so you continue to sort of just build off of those positive things, and that has kind of spillover impact, and I think just lifts the whole image and sense of kind of community pride. I think there's just a tremendous amount of positive things happening here. There's some hiccups, you know, you look at, like I said, Kmart, Shopko, those are big, huge hiccups, and that's particularly challenging maybe for poorer residents or seniors or people that don't have credit cards or don't have Amazon Prime memberships. You know, how do I get by? How do I get kids, you know, shoes for my kids? How do I get a cord so I can hook up my, you know, TV to my laptop or whatever the case may be? So we're also actively, you know, Erin and I spent the better part of this morning actively, you know, discussing that and looking at ways that we can kind of, one of the things we want to do there is kind of really be able to demonstrate to would-be developers or investors, don't just look at our trade area, don't just look at our population demographics, you need to also consider, you know, the tourists that are coming here and factor that into your analysis. So we're going to be drilling down as part of this comp plan update to kind of quantify and tell a story to investors. You know, come, look, we've got some really strong fundamentals here, and we still think there's an opportunity to get some more merchandisers or retailers in here to kind of fill the gaps.
And Kmart and Shopko were not about failing in Waupaca. It was Kmart and Shopko are about, I mean, I don't know how many Kmart stores closed across the country.
I think they're all closing eventually. Yeah.
But it wasn't
Yeah.
about it not working in Waupaca.
Right,
And
right.
you're right. I mean, even friends of me that will drive to Waupaca, that I went to Shopko, then I had to switch to Kmart, and now where do I go?
Now, our concern from economic development standpoint is now those folks, especially on Waupaca, places a little further from the downtown, now maybe you're going to go to the mall or you're going to go to Plover, and while you're there visiting the Kmart and Shopko, you're going to pick up some groceries or you're going to do some of your other shopping. So we have to figure out, you know, strategies to combat that. I know Erin, you know, has been pretty aggressive, and the city's, you know, we're really taking some steps right now and to try to reach out and be proactive to kind of fill those gaps.
Interesting conversation, gentlemen. This was an interesting show. I learned a lot about things like the comprehensive plan and where it's all, what really the nuts and bolts of this kind of stuff are. And getting an update on Main Street has really been interesting for me because it is something that we've been following here for several years.
It's been a long time coming, yep.
It has been a long time coming, and it does need to be improved. But there's always the other side of it, right? So thank you, Justin, for being on the show this afternoon.
You're welcome,
I
Johnny.
appreciate
Yeah, it was
you
great.
coming in and taking time and explaining this to me. It was nice to meet you, Andrew,
Likewise,
and
Joni.
thank you again for being here this afternoon. That is kind of the updates of Waupaca in a nutshell. I know that Main Street has been top of mind for a lot of us, but the zoning changes, tweaks really, I think, to the regulations more than anything else is going to be top of mind. So I'm happy to share that kind of information with you. You are watching What's Happening Waupaca. I am Joni, and we'll see you next time.